So 167, what does that mean? I posted a video on social yesterday and people were messaging me, "Man, what does 167 mean? I want to be prepared. What's the Bible verse? Chapter 167, chapter 16, verse 7. What am I looking for? Looked it up, couldn't figure out the code. It's basically this, that there are 24 hours in a day, right? And there are 7 days in a week, so that's 168 hours in the week. And most of us, we get to spend one of those hours at church. We get to spend one of those hours in church. And during this series, I want to focus on what does it mean to really live for the 167, the other 167 hours that we are not in here, because I believe that that's really what you care about. Now, most of us in church, we've cared about this 1 hour. We've been consumed with this 1 hour. Pastors that I get to meet with, they're so focused on how do we get butts in the seats for this 1 hour. But at Center Church, since the very beginning, we've been about this middle section here, that we want to be disciple sending. We care more about what is happening in your life throughout the week with the people that you engage with than we do what happens in here on Sunday mornings. And so for many of us, though, that was it. That was Christianity. That was church. That was life. That was it. That we spend the time thinking about the one. We spend time going to church, and I would guess for many of us that was it. You make it through the one. You're good. You stand up, sit down, sing when you're supposed to sing, recite what you're supposed to recite, and you're like, this pastor must think that we're all out of shape. What is this stand up, sit down stuff? And for many of us, that's the context that we grew up in. And I would guess for many of us, we've crossed paths with Christians who look very good at the one, right? They look very good on Sunday mornings. They got it all together Sundays. But then you look at them throughout the week and you're saying, this doesn't quite match up. The other 167 didn't look any different because of the one. So what do we do with the one? Or what do we do with the 167? I think that the 1 hour is so important. That's why we do it. We gather here because this time is important. It's important to open up God's word. It's important to engage with other believers. It's important to sing songs even when it's uncomfortable. It's important to do those things. But what does following Jesus look like on Sunday afternoon? Is it really how much of the pastor's message you remembered Sunday afternoon? Is it really Wednesday? What happens on Wednesday? So what happens Sunday afternoon, the Sunday when you're watching football, watching basketball, resting, whatever it is you do on Sunday afternoon? What about later in the week, when Wednesday, when your whole schedule catches up, right? When life catches up, when the kids are going crazy and you feel like you have no sleep, and all of a sudden there's crayon all over the wall, and you're like, how does the one impact the 167? When I'm trying to wrestle these kids to bed, how does the one impact the 167? And church has been really, really bad at this. I don't know if you know this, but church many times operates like an industrial complex. And I mean that to say, like, hey, what we want to do here is we want to build you up to be great Christians so that, most churches say this, so that you can serve us, right? So that you can serve on Sunday mornings or do whatever. And they say, hey, your spiritual gifts, you're great. Let's discover your spiritual gifts so that you can sing on the worship team or be a greeter or do whatever. They're so focused on the Sunday morning thing. Most applications in church are like this. Hey, I think that this applies to you in this way, and this is how you do it. We want you to serve in kids ministry. We want you to give more, or we want you to serve more, instead of what does life really look like in the 167? How does this apply to how you parent your kids, how you hang out with your friends, what temptations you handle during the week? That we've been bad at this, where we hoard spiritual gifts and we say, hey, we only want you to use them for the one. And I'm saying, what if we could use them for the 167? What would life really look like if we use them for the 167? So how does the one, this is a question throughout the series, how does the one impact and change the 167. I love what Warren Wiersbe says. He says that discipleship is a daily discipline. We follow Jesus a step at a time, a day at a time. And so this was the question that Center Church was founded on. How do we build up, how do we form daily disciples? Our first meeting that we ever got together, a few of us got together, as we were dreaming of this church, and we just whiteboarded, okay, what does a daily disciple look like? Not just somebody who's gone through catechism and confirmation and was baptized and kind of has like all the things down, but what does a daily disciple do? Because that's what we care about. We care about you living out and walking with Jesus 168 hours of the week, not just one. And we can form really great Christians who look good in here on Sunday mornings, but if they look terrible, the other 167, right? I'm accountable for that when I step in front of Jesus. And so what does daily discipleship look like? And so during this series, we're gonna dive through one chapter of the Bible, Romans chapter 12. And so we've called this a living sacrifice. Romans chapter 12, verses 1 through 2. You have Bibles in the pews in front of you. You have the YouVersion Bible app that you can follow along in. And so Paul's writing to these Romans, and he really kind of has four sections in here. And Romans is really deep. It's really thick. I encourage you during the series to read through the book of Romans, because in Romans, basically what Paul does is he lays out who Jesus is and why he is worthy of following. And so he gets to this point in Romans chapter 12, and starting in verse 1, he says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. This is your spiritual worship. He says, I appeal to you, therefore. Now, when we were in seminary, our seminary professors basically always said, hey, when you see the word therefore, you always have to ask, what is it there for? It's like the first dad joke. I don't know if it's like passed down from Jesus, but what is therefore? And so the context is chapters 1 through 11 talk about what Jesus has done. And then he says this, he says, therefore, by the mercies of God. Some translations say, in view of the mercies of God. I want to highlight that because so many of us, I know I did, I grew up when you trust in Jesus in view of or because of the judgment of God. The judgment of God. In view of the judgment of God. That's why you trust in Jesus, because you're a bad person and your sin has caused you to fall short and you're going to hell. Like that's the message I heard over and over and over. So many of us, we purchase this fire insurance faith, right? Where we say, I need to just believe in Jesus because if I don't, I'm going to be tortured in hell forever. I don't want that. But that's not what he says. He doesn't say in view of the judgment of God. He says in view of the mercy of God. He doesn't even say in view of or because of heaven. He doesn't say in view of heaven. Many of us, we say, well, okay, even if it's not the hell thing, well, I want to go to heaven, right? I just want to go to heaven when I die. When we play football and there's mansions and gold streets and whatever else is in heaven. In view, there's always like the precious moment stalls that were super creepy. I don't want to go to heaven if those are there. Like in view of heaven. He doesn't even say in view of the blessings of God. Some of us trusted in Jesus because of what Jesus would offer us, right? The new life, the fellowship, all the blessings of God. He doesn't say that. He says, no, in light of everything you know about Jesus, in view of his mercy, in view of his love, in view of his undeserved favor, in view of everything you know about God, this is what you should do with your 167. He says, you should present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Now, the word sacrifice is always a little bit creepy, right? You're like, what did I step into this morning? A living sacrifice? Like, what is going to happen? Is this some kind of cult? Yeah. Did you get the Kool-Aid on the way in? Like, what is happening here with living sacrifice? The word here, present, is priestly language, goes all the way back to the beginning, goes all the way back to Leviticus, where they would come and the priest would present the best offering for all of the people, for the sins of all of the people, that they would dress up, that there was this whole ceremony, that then the priest would come and present the best sacrifice. And so what Paul is saying here, he's reverting back to that. He's looking back at that, and he's looking forward at what we're supposed to do now, that we're supposed to present ourselves as a living sacrifice, not a dead sacrifice, a living sacrifice. This is what God calls Jesus followers to do today. And sometimes, and maybe you're like me, where we present sacrifices to God. We do. We come and we're in here. We spend an hour in here. We drive here. Like, that's a sacrifice. Like, those of you with kids, like, you have to wake the kids up. You have to get them ready. You have to bring them here. Like, that's a sacrifice. Some of you drove from a long way, right? Some people coming from Aurora, Brighton, Castle Rock. Like, that's a sacrifice. So some of us, we present sacrifices. We put money in the basket, or we scan the code, and that's a sacrifice. Or maybe we think about God or read the Bible during the week. Like, that, that's a sacrifice. But I think for many of us, we provide small sacrifices to God. But what Paul is encouraging us to do is he's saying, could you present yourself as a living sacrifice to God? And for many of us, maybe we're sacrificing something. It's not our best, but we're sacrificing something. And God says, I'm looking at you, and I don't want you to sacrifice something. I want you to sacrifice all of it. God is looking at you, and he's saying he wants all of it. He wants the living sacrifice, not a bit of energy. He wants all of your energy, not a bit of focus. He wants all of your focus, not just a sliver of your time. He wants all of your time, not just a little bit of your money. God wants all of your money. And to sum all that up this way, it's simply, God is not looking for us to give a sacrifice. He wants us to be a sacrifice. God's saying, I don't want just parts of you. I want all of you. I don't want just parts. I want all of it. And you might be in here to saying like, okay, well, but God, you don't want all of it. Like, I'll give you parts of it. I'll give you the cleaned up. You say present a sacrifice. The sacrifice was pure and blameless, right? Like, I'll clean up some parts and I'll present you some pure and blameless as best as I can parts. God's saying, no, I want all of it. Give me the dirty stuff. Give me the broken stuff. Give me the stuff that hurts. Give me all of it. And for some of us, it's really difficult to give him that stuff, right? It's really difficult to open that stuff up to the world, but God knows it anyway. He's saying, I want all of it. God's not after our one. He's after our 167. And you and I are very good at segmenting our lives. And we could put on a mask in here, and we could look good for the one, and we could look presentable for the one, and we could look good in front of our Christian friends or whatever. But God's saying, I want all of it. I want the 167. We're really good at saying, okay, here's this block of time where I'm doing the God thing, and then here's this time where I'm a dad. Here's this time where I'm a mom. You're not a dad and a mom. I don't want to get into confusion. Can we cut that from the YouTube thing? Because I don't need to be canceled. But we segment our time really well. This is I pulled this up. This is how Americans spend our time here. I know that you can't see that, but the blue part of this clock is kind of work and work-related activities. Now, if you're like me, there's a lot more blue if we're talking about thinking about work as well. Like, work doesn't just cover that time. I also think about the things that I have to do at work. And so blue, it's like green and blue and red. Like, it's all at the same. So then this green time is sleeping. So work and sleep covers most of your day, if you didn't know that. And then we have leisure and sports, 2 hours and 46 minutes. Most Americans watch a ton of TV, right? Leisure and sports. And then we have eating and drinking and housework and caring for family members and shopping. My wife looked at this and said, this person does not have children. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. Probably not. Put kids in there as well. We're really good at segmenting our lives, aren't we? Okay, this belongs in this box, and this belongs in this box, and this belongs in this box. And I'll give God this time. And so this is really kind of what our week looks like. We can go to the next slide. That 99% of our week we spend doing really nothing much for God. And then we call 0.06% of our time we go to church. We'll give God the one, but we'll kind of isolate him from the 167. And God's saying, I don't want just a piece of the pie. He's saying, I want all of it. I want the whole thing. I'm not looking for you to give a sacrifice. I'm looking for you to be a sacrifice. He says this, that I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. This is your spiritual worship. I don't know about you, but I've always thought of worship as the one thing that we do on Sunday mornings, the 1 hour that we come on Sunday mornings where if you grew up like I grew up, where you dress up, right, and you wear the clothes that you never would wear during the week. By the way, that is why I dress casual up here, because I don't want, if I'm going to reach my community, I should look like the community. I don't want to wear a suit and tie up here when none of my neighbors wear a suit and tie. Like, it doesn't make sense for our context. Like, if I was going to India, I'm going to dress like they do in India. Anyway, I'm going to rant on that. But where you dress up, you stand up, you sit up, you'd sing, and that was the 1 hour on Sunday mornings. That was worship, right? But what does Paul say? He says it's not the one, it's the 167. Worship is not the 1 hour. Saying worship is your life. And here's a little post-Christmas Christmas content. Can I give you some Christmas content that I wasn't able to give you at Christmas because we had too much stuff? Can I give you a little bit of Christmas? And I was, when going through the series that we did at Christmas, I was just amazed by the wise men. I was amazed by the wise men, the way that they came to him. The wise men, when they came and worshiped Jesus as the king, they didn't come because of what he could offer them. They came simply because of who he is. They didn't come because the king could grant them something or give them land or whatever. They came because the king was worthy of worship. The king was worthy of worship. I look at their purity of worship. They give everything for who he is, not just for how it benefits them. It's the awareness of worth. That's what worship is. It's ascribing worth to something, that they believe that he is just so worthy that they come and they worship him. It's not just the one, it's the 167. But it's so easy just to worry about the one, isn't it? You come in here and you say, can't I just check the God box and get on with my actual life? You know I have a life, right, Pastor? Like Mitch, I know that this is your whole life, that this is all you think about is Sunday morning and me and what I'm thinking and feeling. I know that's what you think about, but Pastor, I have a life. I have friends. I know that you probably don't have friends. I have a life. I have a job. I have stuff to worry about. I have hobbies. I have all of that stuff. I have passions. I've made it through the confirmation class and the catechism, and I want to check the one box off here, and I can give a little bit extra here and there, and I can serve, but just for the one. And can I present to you as humbly as I possibly can that's not what God wants. That's not what God wants. That's never what he wanted. He wants the 167. He doesn't want your 167 so that you can be miserable. He doesn't want your life so that you can hate your life. He wants all of it. He wants to be present in all of it. Check out what Paul says next in Romans 12:2. He says, do not be conformed to the world. Man, do you really want to look like the world? Like, do you really? Honestly. I look around and I see depression rising like crazy. See anxiety rising like crazy. I see people so dependent on pharmaceuticals. I see just what's happening in the world. Balloons flying across our country. It's a crazy world out there. I'm not going to get into any of that. Mitch I'm getting myself in trouble today. But I see so much dependence on everything. Let's go back to the balloon thing where we just get like so caught up in a narrative. Like, do you really want to look like the world? That the thing that you're passionate about and writing about and angry about is a freaking balloon flying. Like, is that really what you want? Do you really want dependence on all of those things? Do you really want to look like the world? So he says, do not be conformed by the world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing, you may discern what the will of God is. Underline that word testing. So many times we just say, okay, God, what is your will? What is your will? What is your will? But what does God really want? He wants you to test things. Not just like sit in the corner and pray and God will reveal his will to you, but actually do freaking stuff and God will reveal his will to you as you're doing the freaking stuff. Like do the stuff and he'll reveal his will. God says, test me. Give me your 167 and it will be, what does he say? It will be good. It will be good. Return to the garden. Remember, when God creates things, he says that they are good, that they are very good. God says, test me, test my will. Try it out. Give it a shot. Give me other hours in the week. You're starting with 1, maybe give me 1.5. See that it is good. A return to the garden where things were very good, where things were perfect. He says, test me. See that they are good. See that they are acceptable. Another word there is pleasing. Test me. See that my will is pleasing. As you start to follow me, you'll start to be more and more pleased. You'll start to be more and more acceptable. And then what does he say there? Do we have it up on the screen? So he says, good, acceptable, and what? Good, acceptable, and what? Perfect. When's the last time you said that word? That something is perfect? Like, the world that I live in, the life that I live, like, man, I don't run into a whole lot of perfect a lot. But that's what God is offering you in the 167. He's saying it is perfect. When you give God your everything, God's good, perfect, and acceptable will be everything in your life. When you give God the 167, your 167 will start to look the way that God designed it to look. God wants to be your everything so that he can move in your everything. Not just the 1 hour. Listen to this. If God is love, right? If God is love, if following Jesus is full of wholeness and joy, if this really is an adventure, now I don't want to speak for you, but I want that more than just 1 hour a week. Like what we get to experience here together when we worship, when we open the word, when we feel convicted, when we start to feel closer to God, when we feel like God is so real. Like I want that more than just 1 hour a week. I want that every single hour. And listen, we want this hour to be great. We want this hour to feel like you're growing closer to God, that you're getting to know people who are following Jesus, who you can follow Jesus with. But we also want that for you on Monday. We also want that for you on Wednesday. What if you could follow Jesus like this every hour, not just 1 hour? And there's something unique when we gather together. I understand that there's something different when we gather together, that the Spirit shows up in a different way, but I believe that can happen for you, the other 167. It doesn't mean that the other 167 will be a cakewalk. Because, what does he say there in chapter 12? He says to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. The other 167 isn't going to be easy because you know what the problem with a living sacrifice is? It keeps walking off the altar. And so if we're going to offer ourselves as a living sacrifice, if we're really going to live like this, like the 167 matters, we're going to have to keep putting ourselves back up on that altar and back up on that altar and keep offering ourselves as that sacrifice. We have to continually be rededicating our lives. And so how do we do this? How do we live this way? How do we bring Jesus into our 167? How do I bring him into the work part of my life, the family part of my life? How do I bring him into my private part of my life? How do I bring him into my hobbies? How do I get God to move in every area of my life? This is exactly what we're going to be talking about over the next 6-ish weeks. How do we do this? But we're going to stay in Romans chapter 12. I encourage you to read the book of Romans, but how do you let the one impact the 167? And so I want to start off as we're going to get into all of that throughout this series. This is just the introduction. How do we let God impact the 167? The question, the challenge that I have for you this morning is simply this question. Do you want God in your 167? You're not responding to me, you're responding to him. Maybe you grew up in church and he's kind of been a part of your life. Do you want him in your 167? Maybe you're good at checking the God part of your life, but do you really want him in every part of your life? Maybe God is in quite a few parts of your life. And you say, I read my Bible, I spend significant time. God, Mitch, it's probably more like 150 than 167. Like I spent a lot of time thinking about God and with God. But is God really in every part of your life? In the deep, dark things that maybe he hasn't redeemed yet? Like, do you really want God in those things? Maybe you're used to God, giving God a part of your life, but life for you got so distracted, and God slowly started taking up a smaller part of that pie. And so the question for all of us is, do you want God in your 167? If your answer is yes, this is what I want you to do. I want you to write the number 167 on a sticky note, on a mirror, wherever you can see it. So write down that challenge. You could put it as the background on your screen, put it in a note, put it somewhere where you can see it consistently. We're going to give you some tools to do that here next week where you could just see it consistently. But take that number and just put it 167. Write it on your mirror and say, okay, I want to live for God in the other 167 hours of the week. Put it on the dashboard of your car, put it in your mirror. I want you to have a consistent reminder to stop and remember to invite God into every part of your life. Because when you're at work and you're overwhelmed and you're frustrated and that coworker got on your nerves, you can say, okay, God, I need you. I know that you're with me. And when you're at home and the kids are running around and you just got off work and you're frustrated and maybe your spouse does something or partner does something that annoys you, you just look at the 167 and say, God, I want you to be the center of my family. Later in the week, when you get cut off, you see that 167 and say, okay, God, would you redeem every single part of my life? God, when you get the bad news, when you're at the hospital later this week, sitting with that family member or that loved one, God, you were with me in the midst of that. When you have to have that hard conversation with that person that you've been putting off for a while, you're with me in the 167. And we don't just say, God, Jesus, I want you to be a part of my life. We say, Jesus, I want you to be my life. I don't want you in parts. I don't want you in pieces. I want you in the 167.